Well, here we are, windy, very late autumn. Winter's just round the corner. Even the birds have decided that they prefer to hide from the... Oh no, there's one. Now, by the time you see this video, the election will have been over, and we'll have another federal government. Look, although I stood as an independent Senate candidate in Victoria, I keep saying elections are relatively unimportant in Australia. And they're relatively unimportant because the ideas that can be implemented through legislation in Parliament are limited. And they're limited, as we've seen during this so-called presidential style election, although we have a parliamentary system, not a presidential system. What we've seen is policies that basically support the status quo. It's impossible for any political party, major or minor, at this particular point in time, to have legislation passed in Parliament which ensures that the cake in this country is more evenly divided. Every time a party puts forward a policy, as we saw at the previous federal election, that somehow can affect the bottom line of the investment class, and that 1% that own the means of production, distribution, exchange and communication, we see an avalanche of propaganda to reinforce the status quo. So elections are a point in time. As far as the federal election is concerned, it's one day in a 3-year period. Now is the time that we need to become involved in activities and actions which promote policies which will see the redistribution of wealth in this country, because the dilemma in this country is not the size of the cake, but how the cake is divided. And that struggle starts on the day after the election, after the 21st of May. That's when that struggle begins. Because when you look at the most reformist government we've had in this country since Federation, the Whitlam Labor government, which in the space of 4 years passed more reformist legislation than every parliament combined since Federation in the last 122 years, they had momentum. And that momentum was created by the activities that people were conducting in the streets in this country, where they demanded change, they demanded reformist change, not radical change, but major reforms in this country. Without that momentum, without that popular support, that legislative agenda would never have been put in place. And over 50 years later, almost 50 years later I should say, that legislative agenda continues to have an impact on this country. As far as the social security system is concerned, public education is concerned, public health is concerned, and the discussion regarding putting this country's mineral resources in public hands. It was only with the election of the Keating-Hawke government that we saw the legislative changes come into place, which reinforced the power of the investment class, and every government since then has been doing that. So today is the day. What you need to do is you need to sort out what you can do, how you can act, what organisations you can join, if there's nothing there that suits your fancy, what are the significant issues of our time. For far too long, as we saw with the gay marriage, or I should say marriage equality, as we saw with the struggle regarding the vaccine mandates, and as we continue to see today, issues dominate the political debate. Who owns what, how wealth is decided, how wealth is produced, how we tackle the climate emergency, where we don't give free rein to green capitalists to create centralised energy system. All those major issues are dependent on people becoming organised and raising those issues in between elections. So the 22nd of May is the day you should be reassessing where you put your energies, what changes you'd like to see, whether you'd like to see the ridiculous investment mentality regarding housing continue, whether you want to see the ridiculous situation of this country's mineral resources being developed for the sake of billionaires and corporations, whether you want that to continue, whether you want the legislative agenda to be concerned with what happens to the 1/3 of Australians that rely on social security benefits to survive, whether we need a universal basic income, whether we need a major changes to the taxation system where the taxation burden is carried by those who make the biggest profits. It doesn't matter how smart they are. Ultimately, the type of profits they make, as we see in Amazon, and it's what we see with Mr. Musk and Tesla, the profits that are made are not made by individuals. They are made by the people who work for those individuals. And you make profits in two ways. You either rip off your customers or you rip off your workers. And in Australia in the 21st century, it's a combination of both, but mainly you rip off your workers by basically making trade unions illegal, by making it illegal for workers to withdraw their labour during an enterprise bargain, outside an enterprise bargaining agreement period, by being drawn in to a war with China, because Ukraine and Russia is just the first course. It is the entree. This is a war that, as I've said before, should never have happened. Negotiations should have occurred which would have prevented this war. But the United States and its allies, mainly the United States, was very keen to ensure that Russia was dragged into some type of war that it would never win, that it would never exercise itself from, to weaken Russia as a competitor in the world economic market, so that they could turn their attention to China. And turning our attention to China, the United States' attention to China, while Russia is bogged down in the Ukraine, means that Australia becomes a potential Ukraine. Now, I know you think that's ridiculous, but when you think of the amount of United States military intervention in this country and how our foreign policy is dictated by United States policy and ideology, and how our military capabilities are totally incorporated into the United States military industrial digital complex, you begin to realise how difficult things can become. Well, now's the time for us to move. A little bit of noise in the background. I think some neighbours are cutting wood. It's that time of year. So as I said before, now's the time to act. And it is an important time to act, because if you leave your run till the next federal election, nothing's going to change. The policy initiatives will not change. The mistake most people make regarding political action and change is that they leave it to a particular point in time before some type of major decision. So as I said before, if we don't want to be a Ukraine in the South Pacific, we need to be agitating for an independent foreign policy that looks at the region, looks at the potential allies we have, not actually push aside our South Pacific neighbours as we continue to do with our attitude to the climate emergency, because their number one issue is the climate emergency, because it is a great possibility that they will lose their very homes, their very islands, as sea levels rise. So now is the time to act. Now, there's nothing wrong with issue-orientated politics, but all issues can be incorporated in the current political, social, cultural framework. Even the push towards a treaty between this country's First Nations people and the governments is moving ahead. Although conservative governments may not want to pursue this, there is enough momentum to push for it. But ultimately, the type of society we live in, how wealth is created, how wealth is divided, is a matter for us. And it will be a matter, it's not a matter for our elected representatives, because we've just had an election, and what you've done is you've given the government of the day a signed blank cheque basically to do what they want within the limitations set to them by the 1% that own the means of production, distribution, exchange and communication. A limitation in the parliamentary agenda. Now we can incorporate capitalist economics in a response to the climate emergency. But that doesn't mean that things will change. All it means is more centralised energy sources, whether they're wind or solar or hydroelectric, owned by a small section of the population. What we need, as I said during the election campaign, is decentralised energy resources which are locally owned, are locally managed, which produce energy, and excess energy goes to the grid for industrial production. So there are many, many, many ways that you can approach change. And as I said at the beginning, now is the time. Now is the time for change to occur. But it will only occur if you become involved. Now we're heavily promoting public interest before corporate interests. It's a little bit difficult registering as a federal political party because of the 1,500 membership cap, but we're working towards registering as a state-based political party in Victoria, as the majority of our members are in Victoria. And there's a state election at the end of the year, at the end of November. It's important that we create the momentum for policy initiatives, especially policy initiatives based on public housing. And I'll repeat it again. We support public housing, which is publicly owned and publicly managed, because it's a win-win situation for everybody, not only just the people who can't afford to enter the private housing market, but it's a win-win situation in terms of putting downward pressure on property prices, downward pressure on rents. But you will find that in Victoria and many of the other states in this country that public housing is no longer important. Public housing has been privatised day after day after day. Older public housing units are being knocked over, given to the private sector for a peppercorn return. Management has been given to privately based organisations. So if you want a strong public housing sector, you need to become involved in activities. If you want a universal basic income, you need again to become involved. Whether you join public interest before corporate interest isn't the central issue. The central issue is whether you are willing to sit back and wait for governments to initiate change in between elections, or whether you want to initiate change in between elections. Unless you initiate change, as we saw during the Whitlam-led Labor government, which had a mandate which was forged on the streets by activists during that period to introduce reforms, nothing will ever change. We will see the bland, boring, innocuous campaigns that we've seen. Campaigns that are dominated by people with money. Campaigns which are skewed in order to ensure that the 1% continue to enjoy their largesse. I mean, the greatest thing that has happened in this country over the last 40 years is the growth in inequality. 40 years ago, if you invested $1 in a project and you made a profit, 33% of that profit would go back to the investors and 67% would go back to the workers which made that profit. Today, 4 decades later, the equation has been reversed. 67% of every dollar profit goes into the hands of the investor and 33% goes to the hands of workers. We've got the ridiculous situation today where people talk about the fact there are no wage increases. Not even wage increases to keep up with inflation. And this is a serious matter. If you don't have the ability to strike, you don't have the ability to organise on a work site, then, and you have to work individually with your employer, individually bargain, well, the chances of any changes occurring, unless you're at the top echelons, are minimal. No wonder we see CEOs with wages of $5 to $10 million, $15, $50 million per year, and we see the working poor on a wage of $20.22, a minimum wage of $20.22. This is the situation we find ourselves in today. Today is the first day that you should think about what you can do in order to encourage change. You may be too old, you may be ill, you may be preoccupied. You can help financially. If you can't help financially, you may be able to help by donating some of your labour in organisational capacities. You may be able to be involved in many of the actions which we organise. You also could, from your own home, become part of a change initiated through social media. I know there's a lot of garbage on social media. We drown in garbage on social media. But it can be used to share ideas. It can be, until obviously the ideas become powerful and these privately owned organisations stop you broadcasting your ideas on social media. But now is the time. So there are many ways you can become involved. You can support activists financially. You can support them by sharing material on social media via your various networks. You can support them via discussions you have with your family and friends. Because if you don't raise an idea, nothing changes. As I said before, as I said during the campaign, the whole point of standing as an independent Senate candidate for an election was not to win or to get my deposit back. It was about sowing policies which don't suit the 1% that own the means of production, distribution, exchange and communication. It was about ensuring that the cake was more evenly divided in this country. I made the analogy of the Mountain Ash. The Mountain Ash is the world's second tallest tree. The Victorian Mountain Ash grows to about 300 to 400 years. It starts its life as a 1 millimetre seed. It needs a catastrophic fire for the seed to be released from its kernel. The Victorian Mountain Ash is the tallest flowering tree on this planet. In the 21st century, we are sowing seeds, And these seeds will take root as inequality grows in this country, as the 1% continue to ensure they control not only this country's wealth, but this country's parliamentary agenda. And the climate emergency will ensure that this fire, these growing inequalities, will be magnified through the climate emergency, because it's those people with the least who suffer the most during the climate emergency. So a combination of a climate emergency, increasing inequalities, is the very fire which these policies need for them to become household discussion points, for them to be part of a push to change the parliamentary agenda before the next federal election in 2025.